Hey everyone, Gill Gross here, and it is time for a preview of the 2024 Wimbledon Gentlemen's Singles Final between Carlos Alcaraz and Novak Djokovic. The tennis gods have blessed us, I am happy to report. No rivalry was more thrilling, more fruitful than Djokovic-Alcaraz last year. No match embodied that fact more than their Wimbledon epic last year. And it is only right that we get round two on Sunday between Djokovic and Alcaraz, a generational crossover that we need to enjoy while it lasts, because unlike some of the rivalries that Djokovic has had throughout his career with Federer and Nadal and Murray, we're only going to get a limited slice of time where Djokovic and Alcaraz are going to be doing battle at the high, when both of them are at full power and doing themselves justice. And hopefully Sunday will be included in that. The storylines are incredible. Djokovic with the surgery recovery, the revenge from last year's loss in the Wimbledon final, the 2024 turnaround, a real chance for a, hey everyone, I've still got it. I'm still here at 37 years old. And for Alcaraz, the biggest thing, and I've talked about the difference before between a one major career and a two major career, and it feels like a world of difference. And this is another situation where it's like one win over Djokovic at Wimbledon is unbelievable. 2 wins over Djokovic at Wimbledon in a final, it's not unbelievable. It's, you better believe it, I am that good. I am that guy. That's kind of the difference, I think, between 1 and 2. And another thing I love about this right now is the mystery factor, which I'll get into more, but I feel like it's a 10 out of 10. I think this is really hard to call. Now, time and time again in tennis, there have been matches where we think it's going to go one way or the other, and people are wrong. Like the masses are wrong, or the majority is wrong. That happens all the time. But here, I don't think there's a massive majority on one side or the other, and that makes it even more juicy coming in, because you are going to have a difference of opinions here, and it truly feels unpredictable. The head-to-head is 3-2 Djokovic. They played, the vast majority of their meetings were actually not only last year, but second half or second part of last year, especially if you include Roland Garros in there, which is maybe first. It's like borderline. It's in between first half and second half, I'd say. The forgotten meeting was the last meeting in Turin. Semifinal in Turin was the only time where they didn't play an epic, really. And it was 6-3, 6-2 for Djokovic. It was the first Djokovic-Alcaraz match that was kind of like, okay, that wasn't anything crazy. That was forgettable. But for Djokovic, it was obviously encouraging, as Alcaraz served his very, very best. Tremendous serving by Carlos, but Djokovic made up for it by being way, 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 way more consistent off the ground, and he won quite easily. Fast indoor hard court, that was. Before then, Cincinnati, epic, third set tiebreak, a match with more twists and turns than maybe I've ever seen in a best-of-3 set match. And ultimately, it was actually Djokovic who was probably a little bit stronger physically in the end, and Alcaraz had a hand cramp in the 10-point the final set tiebreak that ended up being pretty significant. Wimbledon final, of course, 5-set win for Alcaraz, unprecedented, a total mind-bending result after Roland Garros, where Alcaraz ended up cramping at the start of the third set, giving Djokovic an easy final couple sets in the semifinal in Paris. And everybody assuming that if Alcaraz couldn't beat Djokovic on clay, then there's no way that Alcaraz can beat Djokovic on grass. But Carlos did what Carlos does in that Wimbledon final last year: learn for the next time. And he took so many great lessons, and he played just a sensational 5th set. And then their first meeting was in Madrid last year, not 2 years ago, sorry, and it was won by Alcaraz. The way I'm going to structure this, I'll start with Djokovic. I'll go to Alcaraz, and I'll lay out the arguments for both, and then I will mercifully go to my prediction. So Djokovic, if his game is firing on all cylinders, I do see a technical path. I see enough matchup advantages for Djokovic over Alcaraz, especially on a surface like this, where I can see paths to success and ultimately paths to victory. And the first part of that is that he wins the serve return battle. And what does that look like? That looks like making Alcaraz pay dearly for missed spots on serve with aggressive returning. He makes Alcaraz hit first ball backhands. His kryptonite, the kick serve out wide on the ad side, which Alcaraz has terrorized Djokovic with, is less of a threat on grass. On serve, Djokovic serves and volleys if Alcaraz stands deep. He hits big second serves if Alcaraz stands up. His spot serving makes Alcaraz reach for most returns, and his +1s are lethal. It's those quick 0-4 shot rallies that I think Djokovic has to have. He has to have in a big way if he wants to win this match. But if I were to stack the two up, serve quality, I take Djokovic because of the precision. And return quality, it's a little bit harder to call than the serve, believe it or not. But you take Djokovic still, it's a more solid, consistent, and consistently deep and consistently in play return of serve that Djokovic is able to manage with some of the cleanest return of serve technique, actually the cleanest return of serve technique of all time, I think it's safe to say. Now, in the rallies, there is also paths for Djokovic once the points develop, and that mostly has to do with his discipline and his consistency. He goes hard into Alcaraz's forehand. He plays deep down the middle. His depth and pace off the ground don't give Alcaraz a chance to attack high percentage. Doesn't give Alcaraz's forehand enough time to do the damage that it's capable of. And another big thing for Djokovic is his lows are not as low as Alcaraz's lows. He is less likely to go into a spell of errors than Alcaraz. And in general, Novak's concentration is more consistent. Evidenced in part by the fact that Djokovic, since his second round match with Jacob Fernley, hasn't really had hiccups. He hasn't really had a lot of moments. I mean, the start of the match against Popyrin, I suppose. But since then, he's been clinical, and he has won 9 sets in a row. Alcaraz has not quite been capable of that kind of consistency throughout his matches. He's dropped sets in each of his last 4, and you can compare the quality of opponents, and there's an extra match for Alcaraz in there. He didn't get the good fortune of a walkover in the quarterfinal. But the fact is, I think that the point stands, essentially, regardless of the comparison of opponent skill, that Djokovic is less likely to dip throughout matches compared to Alcaraz. And on a surface where serves are rewarded, it is even more likely that those loose games, those loose service games, are ultimately costly, and that a recovery from those loose service games become impossible on a surface like grass. So that's kind of the breakdown for me for how Djokovic gets it done. And I can see it. I absolutely can see it. As for Alcaraz, there's a best of 5 factor. I just want to build on what I just talked about, the concentration thing. Because yes, Carlos's performance have been uneven, but when he finds his game, and he has more leeway, more time to do so in a best of 5 set match, when he finds his game, it's been over. It is over for opponents. And we've seen that usually second half of matches. Against Hugo Humbert, it was a little bit different. He was off to a hot start, but then it was at the end of the 4th set where he just went on this insane run. Humbert did nothing wrong, but there was nothing he could do because Alcaraz's best is too good. And I believe that even against this version of Novak Djokovic, Alcaraz's best is a little bit too good, which doesn't always decide tennis matches because it's hard to play your best. But the fact is, for Alcaraz, he moves the fastest, he hits the biggest, his touch is the most delicate. And I think once the points develop, that's where the explosivity of Alcaraz is going to give him the biggest advantages. So serve return, obviously you can think about it in terms of distance covered. You have to serve into a very small box. You only need to account for a very small area of space when you're returning. Serve return to me is more of a skill. It's more of a skill, technique, hand-eye kind of thing. It's not about, I'm not speaking in absolute terms here, but the movement and the explosive shot making and the creativity, it doesn't come into play as much. And that's where I think Djokovic is in a better position to take advantage of those serve return dynamics. But I think when the point breaks down and it gets a little bit more athletic, more dynamic and explosive, that's where I think Alcaraz does have the edge. He is harder to put away because he is faster at this point in his career. And he's more dangerous from neutral because his finishing weapons are more potent. And when you have both of those things going for you and you keep the errors down, you are usually in a good position to take over when it comes to neutral situations and rallies. I also think that you can push back against the idea that Djokovic is going to clearly have an advantage in serve return. Just because you look at last year at Wimbledon, and it didn't play out that way. I thought it would. But Alcaraz out-aced Djokovic 9-2. Alcaraz's serve down the stretch of the fifth set after going up a break was unbelievably good. Didn't really offer Djokovic much of an opening to even get into points with the serve plus one aggression. So that's the serve. I mean, we've seen him turn it on. And we've talked about how usually when he needs it, that's when he gets it. And that was the case, for example, against Francis Tiafoe, when he had to up the serving level, and he did at this tournament. And then as far as his return is concerned, I just want to go back to a month ago in Paris, where he's facing Alexander Zverev and making Zverev's serve look manageable. Returning on a clay court, returning on a grass court isn't the same. But we're talking about Alexander Zverev here. For my money, the second best server in all of tennis. And what did he win? Like 60 in the 60s on first serve return points? I don't think he broke 70. Alcaraz can do things on the return of serve that are elite, incredible. I think fifth set at Wimbledon last year is a good example of what I'm talking about, because in terms of Alcaraz's best being too good, because Djokovic did not make that many mistakes down the stretch of that set. Obviously, there's the famous swing volley that he missed on with a break chance. But it was not a sloppy set by Djokovic. Novak did not make a lot of errors whatsoever. Alcaraz mostly took it. He grabbed it. He's one of the rare guys who has the ability to do that. Then there's the numerical arguments. You look at Alcaraz, of course, having won the last major, having had the better season side by side with Djokovic, having been tested against top 10 players on a regular basis, and he is 7-1 against top 10 players. Djokovic is 0-1 against top 10 players since March. And that number for Alcaraz, 7-1, is since March. If you make it the full year, Djokovic is 0-2. His only two top 10 matches were Sinner at the Australian Open and Casper Ruud in Monte Carlo. What about Alcaraz in big finals? We know that Djokovic is incredible in all of these kind of career-long metrics. But Alcaraz, 7-1 in big finals. He has been incredibly ruthless in these spots, and the one loss was to Djokovic in the Cincinnati final. but numerically, Alcaraz has shown more recently. Now, tactically, I don't think there's all that much to get into with Alcaraz, but he kept trying to get the ball high on Djokovic's backhand in Cincinnati, and he ended up getting into too many backhand rallies, and that hurt him. It's one thing to flag. At Wimbledon, I don't think his plan is going to try to get the ball up high on Novak's backhand because it's not a high bouncing surface. He might try to slice to Novak's backhand, which is something that I think he should mix in, but he needs to be careful not to marry it because you don't want to get into too many backhands if you're Alcaraz against Novak Djokovic. I think the keys for Alcaraz are less so specific patterns or tactics and more so his ability to absorb quality, which has to do also with accepting quality when it comes to making decisions about the incoming ball. I mean, Djokovic has the best depth you'll ever see, and he's going to maintain ground stroke speeds, and he's going to be pretty unattackable. So you have to be methodical. You have to break him down patiently, and you're going to have to also be able to play some defense against Djokovic's penetrating and precise ground strokes. He might not blow you off the court. He'll give you a chance to get your racket on the ball unless he's coming forward where he's a great finisher. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is, and this is something that also stood out at Wimbledon last year, is Alcaraz needs to try to make it so that when the ball is on his racket, he's usually not missing, even when Djokovic is hitting the ball hard and deep. So I'm talking about pace absorption. I'm talking about depth absorption. And that's, I think, going to be a big key for Alcaraz. The other thing is make first serves to good locations. And I know that you can kind of copy and paste, oh, he needs to serve well. I know you can kind of say that about every player, every match, previewing every tennis match for the rest of time. And it's like almost like a throwaway line. Oh, he's got to serve well. I think this is different. I think it's more important than normal. I think Djokovic needs to gain advantages with his return of serve. I could bet you that when we look back at the match and we look at games in which Novak Djokovic broke, I don't think we're going to see neutralizing returns. I think we're going to see offensive returns. I think we're going to see returns deep down the middle that forced errors outright. Right. I think we're going to see returns deep down the middle that led to Djokovic attacking on the fourth shot of the rally. And I think the difference between success and failure for Alcaraz is going to be the ability to keep Djokovic's aggressive returning at bay. Now, the mental side, before I get to the prediction, is interesting. Difficult for me to kind of put my finger on. Last year, that part was important. We were talking a lot about that, especially because it was very clear that Djokovic's main advantage at Roland Garros over Alcaraz was mental. That Carlos was so hyped up, so tense, so overly enthusiastic that he cramped really, really quickly. And, you know, it had to do with the nerves, almost undoubtedly, because we all know that Alcaraz is more fit than cramping at the start of the third set. And then he made those mental adjustments, and he came out at Wimbledon with freedom, and he found a way to actually just enjoy himself and be almost process-oriented instead of result-oriented. Now coming into this one, I don't see a massive reason why Alcaraz would struggle all that much with pressure. I thought there was more pressure on Alcaraz in the semifinal against Medvedev, being expected to win that, and having lost to Medvedev at the U.S. Open last year. But in this case, Alcaraz has already done this. He already has the win over Djokovic at Wimbledon, and he is the defending champion. I don't think he has that much to lose as a player who's so young, so ahead of schedule in his career. I'm not seeing a lot of reason. This is a good thing. I think everybody should be happy to see this if they want to see great tennis. I'm not seeing Alcaraz as being in a super pressurized situation here. Now, Djokovic, I think this is more important to Novak, the match. One, because there's uncertainty. The idea that Djokovic has not tested his game against a fellow elite opponent. And when I say elite, I use that word, many of you will know this, I use that word sparingly. I'm talking about 3 or 4 players at a time when I say the word elite. So the fact that Djokovic hasn't tested himself against elite competition really since January means that there's going to be some mystery factor, I think, for Novak. I don't think Djokovic knows exactly how this is going to go or what this is going to feel like. I think that contributes to nerves, and also the clock is running down. That can be hard for a player as they go further and further down the road in their career to manage nerves as you start to feel like it could be your last chance. That said, I'm never really going to worry that much about Djokovic and nerves because I always say this about Djokovic, he eats pressure for breakfast. He eats it up. So the good news, I think, is that I'm not all that worried about either player when it comes to nerves coming into the match. Now, that doesn't mean that nerves aren't going to play a factor because they so often do. But as far as who has some sort of like mental advantage, and when I look at mental advantages, both of them have as much belief as you can have, like 10 out of 10 belief, both of them, right? So it really comes down to who might get more nervous, who might handle those pressurized situations better. And I'm having trouble really finding an angle on that one way or the other, which is similar to my prediction. Because I am being 100% honest with you when I say that I could not decide who to pick in this match. That I took a shower and I was in the shower trying to figure out who to pick, and I could not decide. And I went back and forth and back and forth. And it's been a long time since I felt so like I felt so poor about, not poor, I mean, look, torn would be the word. So part of me is, of course, if you're torn, you can't go wrong with Djokovic at Wimbledon. Just pick Djokovic at Wimbledon. You see the track record. The proof is in the pudding. Just default to that. Part of me says that. The other part of me says, look, that doesn't actually matter. The score right now is love all, love all, love all. Djokovic does not lead 24-3 when they start playing tomorrow. It's 0-0. Only Sunday matters. The better player on Sunday wins. So like I actually tweeted out the top 10 stat with Djokovic, and I just said, wow, he hasn't really played great competition in a long time, which adds to the mystery. And I got so many responses about Novak's long-term history as if that's a good rebuttal to the idea that recently, for a tennis player, recent is pretty short. There hasn't been that proof. There hasn't been that measuring stick match for Djokovic. So you can't go wrong with Novak Djokovic at Wimbledon. I think that's true. History doesn't really matter on Sunday. I think that's also true. I can't get myself to feel good about any pick. So what I'm doing is I'm keeping what I had before the tournament. I had Novak Djokovic winning Wimbledon. I'm going to stick to my guns. I'm going to lock that in. This is Djokovic rested on the least physical surface, on a surface that allows him to take advantage of certain tactical edges that he should have over Alcaraz. He's got incredible skills on this surface. He is a little bit more reliable than Carlitos, a little more consistent. If things break down, if Alcaraz isn't at his best, I think that Djokovic will be there to take advantage of that. Ultimately, I think if it goes 5, Alcaraz is going to win. I think Djokovic's best chance is to win it in 4. I'm going to say my official prediction is Djokovic in 4. This is the kind of match that I am a lot more excited to watch than I am to predict. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.